Prospect House Media.
And now, prepare yourself for the only weekly podcast you won't want to miss. Welcome to the Ameritocracy Show with Troy Edgar, live from our studios in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C.
Hey everybody, I am Troy Edgar and welcome to the Ameritocracy Show. Thank you for tuning in and checking it out. It is greatly appreciated. This podcast examines the conditions for personal and economic growth and opportunity across America. This week, I met with executive coach and author Les Whitney in our L.A. studio. Les has had an incredible career as an entrepreneur and business leader and spent the last 20 years as a Vistage Master Chair, coaching CEOs on leadership, design thinking, achieving results, and sustainable growth. In 2019, Les was diagnosed with stage 4 lung and brain cancer and was provided a 5% chance of survival over the next 5 years. At that critical inflection point, Les turned his passion into writing his book called Cancer's Gifts, A Loving Journey Toward the Final Chapter. In this book, he emphasizes the importance of vulnerability and open communication in dealing with cancer and other challenges. In the interview, he shared his philosophy of living in the present moment and not fearing the future or dwelling on the past. He hopes to reach 1 million people with his message, and he has received positive feedback from readers who have found hope and inspiration in his book. As Les left the interview, he signed my book with the following message. Troy, together we can help people live a great life for the rest of their life. I hope you enjoy and will help me get this message out to the ones that you care about. Good afternoon, Les. How you doing?
Good. Good afternoon.
Yeah, thank you for coming up here to the studio. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm excited.
Yeah. You know, you and I have a couple connections in place, and you know, it's interesting in my career. You know, you work with people, you work with clients, you end up having friendships, and then they end up being lifelong friendships. And you know, a while back, I did an interview with Lisa Dante Papini, and somebody I went to USC MBA school with, and I've had a great long relationship with her. And in the middle of the interview, she starts talking about this great executive coach, and you know, her story. It was a great episode, and I won't recap it here. But after the episode, we started talking, and she was talking more about the relationship that she had with that coach, which was you. And then that episode aired, and I have another friend that was watching Lisa and said, "Oh my God, I didn't know, you know, Lisa, she's one of my dearest friends, and that coach is my coach." And that's Mohammed Khan. Yeah. And so what I wanted to do, Les, is, you know, a couple things is that, like, you have a unbelievable reputation as the executive coach, and I want to talk a little bit about your background, you know, but you know, really today, what I'm hoping to be able to do is to talk about, you know, in the middle of this great career that you've had, and we'll talk in detail there. You know, you've had all this impact on some really remarkable leaders. And 2019, you get diagnosed with cancer, and it's pretty serious cancer, and I'll let you explain that. And in the middle of all that, you thought it'd be a good idea to write a book. And so, you know, today, you know, I have your book here, Cancer's Gifts, a living journey or loving journey towards the final chapter. And I would just say that, you know, doing my research as I do, I really started reading this. And I think anybody that's had to deal with this on a personal basis or in a professional work spot, you know, it's something that definitely resonated. But I think we'll talk a lot about the book, but what I wanted to do a little bit different maybe in this interview than the ones that I've seen is, you know, you get somebody that is a coach. You know, you're usually helping people at their hardest time. They're making changes in their life. You know, you've focused specifically on doing executive coaching. So, you know, being able to have that capability, but then to have to kind of get on the other side of the table And then, Lisa's story with the discussion is sometimes the mentor becomes the mentee and vice versa. And so what I was hoping to be able today is to talk a little bit about, going from that executive coach position to kind of getting that sickness, what you turned towards to really stay focused in a very positive, and then really what your message is in this book, I think was remarkable. And I want to be able to talk through that. So if you wouldn't mind just a little bit talking, maybe start from the beginning of where did you start your career and how did you make that journey through to Vistage where you ended up being this executive coach?
Okay. Well, my career started in San Diego. I had got my master's degree at San Diego State University and was working at Center Gas and Electric, where I happened to meet my wife, which is probably the best thing ever happened to me in my life. But while I was there, I realized that a big company was not a place for me because I had too much going on in my brain, too much happening that I wanted to make a difference now. And being a small cog down on the ladder just didn't fit. Mm-hmm. So I moved on and went to a company, which is kind of interesting story. I was there, brought in as operations manager at this company, and I was working in the operations, but I found an empty desk with all kinds of letters of credit that are used to finance international transactions, and they were all expired. And what had happened is the company was doing about $40,000 a year in export, but nobody was watching it. Nobody was doing anything about it. So over the weekend, through Telex, which is way back in technology, I contacted every one of those people. And by the end of the year, we were doing $1 million in exports just because I started contacting these people on my own. Wow. So it wasn't my job. That was always my philosophy, is to just do it and ask for forgiveness later, as you've heard many people say. And so I did it. And so by the end of the year, I was vice president of sales and marketing. And we sold the company, and I went off and started my own export company. And that's what started me into running companies. And for the next 20 years, I ran my export company, a company that was a manufacturing a consumer goods company, started up a company making baseball pitching machines, and then ran a company making doors and windows and installing doors and windows. And so for 20 years, I'm running companies. And I woke up one day and I said, I don't know if I've having that much fun, even though I'm the boss and I'm doing this. So the last 5 years, kind of stepping back, I was in a Vistage group, which is the coaching mentoring organization. And so I went to my group and said, I want to find something else. And they all said, you're practically our coach and mentor, so why don't you go into that? And I've been doing that for the last 20 years. Wow. That's a quick overview.
Yeah. Well, let's peel back Vistage a little bit. Okay. I've had an executive coach on here, Ann Collier. She lives in D.C. She'd helped me personally on a bunch of different stuff. A bunch of Fortune 500 executives, C-level execs have used her. And so it was an interesting episode to kind of get her to talk a little bit about that. But Vistage, the model seemed a little bit different. Like I said, I've talked about this with Mohammed. I've talked about it with Lisa, and then I've had other people talk about how that process differs from just the typical executive coach process.
It's a very unique model. It's been around for 70 years, so this organization's been very effective. There's really two major components. There's the group, and what my responsibility is to put together 15 to 18 quality, seasoned CEOs, business owners, presidents, put them together as a group that would meet once a month as a peer group to help each other, plan their business, help with strategies, challenge each other, push each other, reel in each other, just a little bit of all of it. And so once a month, this group would meet, and it was my job to facilitate that meeting. I was in Africa a few weeks ago with an ex-member, and he said, Les, what you did is guide and control. I said, what do you mean guide and control? He said, you guided the conversation to make sure we stayed on track, and you controlled all of these wild personalities that tried to take control and own it. And so you were guiding us and controlling us. So that was my role in the meeting. I kind of like that description. And then each person I meet with officially for 2 hours once a month and unofficially whenever they call. And in that, my job is to question all their answers, to challenge pretty much all their thoughts. Some of them need to be pushed a little bit. Some of them need to be reined in a little bit. Some of them need to understand that their brilliant idea isn't the only answer. And so I have to ask the right questions. What I always strove for is not to give them my idea of what the answer should be. So what I would do is if they ask me, Les, what should I do? And they always did. Les, what should I do? What should I do? And I would say, at the meeting, when you get input from everyone in the group, then I'll give you my input. But I want you to get, there's 15 to 18 people that are smarter than I am. And you've got to take advantage of their wisdom before you use my wisdom. Yeah. And that's how it worked. And it worked great. And so, sometimes I feel like a bit of a fraud because, what did I do? I just created the space for them to have these great opportunities. And
I think it's this mentoring board. A big part of the podcast we try to flesh out here too is to really have the podcast be an extension of a tool. Like at the end of the this process, we'll have hopefully hundreds of podcast episodes, and you would be able to pick something up on executive coaching, and they would come in and hear what your perspective would be. Beautiful. And kind of going through, it's interesting that in the book, I read the whole book, but there was parts in there where you had 10 of the people that you've worked with write some parts of this, like a dedication, to you or something to think about. And I read Mohammed's, and it was interesting is that knowing him and dealing with him in a business sense, I learned a little bit about him through that process too, which is, he looked at the Vistage thing, I think, from a perspective of like a group of advisors. It was one of those where he definitely, once he had said, hey, I'm going to do this, then it got very personal. Like you took him one-on-one, away from the group. And then, and in the book, it even said that, there was a point where he knew he had to pull the trigger of whatever he was getting ready to leave and start his own firm. And, in there said he woke up and you called him right away and said, look, you're not doing this by yourself. I'm here. And, I've started a bunch of companies and I've done, really things that are, you definitely sit back. And I've talked about this before too, is, I'm a father of three, and I take my responsibility as a leader of my family. My kids are all grown, but, you're putting everybody in harm's way. So you got to be really careful. You can be an entrepreneur and be very, have great ideas, but if you fail for the whole family. Yep. And I think Mohammed strikes me as a guy that takes on those heavy burdens. Yes. And so I think, but the book, I think, and I won't give everything away from the book, but it was just interesting to kind of hear kind of a more private side of the contemplation that people have. And I'm sure that's what you deal with as an executive coach.
That's at the core of my belief on the role of an executive coach. I go to coach as president of a company, and a human being shows up. And I can't help them through whatever challenge they're having in the business unless I know their whole life, their belief systems, their values. And so I have to understand them as a person, because the guidance has to fit them. I do not give two people the same guidance. It has to fit their personality. It has to fit their values, their life experience. Each one of us has completely different life stories. And it's my job to know their life story as well as anyone. And I believe, at least with the clients I have, perhaps only their spouse is closer to them or knows more about them than I do. And I think that's important to coaching. I think it's important to friendship. If I'm willing to invest everything of me and get everything of them, that just builds a great friendship.
It's interesting, when I have started companies, you can be pretty lonely, because, a lot of that burden is on you. You can't sit back and kind of pick things apart too much, because then you break the confidence and spirit of the team. Right. But you want to get the most out of everybody you can. And at the end of the day, you're paying the bills. Yep. And so I could see where that would be a value. But I would tell you, I I'd contemplating at a period of Vistage and that type of a relationship. And it's a factor of time. It's like, I remember one of my companies got to a point, it was pretty big, and we contemplated on whether we should have a formal board of directors. And then I don't know if I'm not claiming I'm a control freak, but it's like, I don't know if I want to answer to somebody else because, and it may be the right answers, but it's if I don't want to do this and be just this frustrated. And so I think me getting to where I've been in my life, my view of an executive coach would have been more of someone like Ann, where I got what I needed and I got the heck out of there. And she was like an assassin. She knew exactly, she could diagnose the problem and boom. And then I had to kind of use that time for something else after. And so I don't know if when you're meeting with people or potential clients back when you're in your full swing, at Lisa had told me that, she goes, I remember I was introduced and I had to meet and she didn't think she needed a coach either. What is your view when you come across people like that are thinking they have all the answers? And
first off, I'm not an accountability person. If you commit to something, I believe you committed to yourself. You didn't commit to me. Now, I might say, did you do it? Did you mean it? Is there something else you're doing? What are your plans? How are you going? But whether you did it or not makes no difference to me because it's you, it's your life, it's what you want. So I made sure that was clear, that I wasn't there for accountability. And the same thing for the group. There were members always asking, can we do an accountability thing? And I said, no, that's their choice. I want follow-up. I want to know where they're at. But it's up to them to choose their actions in their life. And so in that regard, I see coaching differently than a lot of people because a lot of people see coaching all about accountability. And so I really look at that's why I say I'm a mentor, not a coach.
Let me just one more piece before we pivot off of this is like Vistage as an organization. Yeah. So 35 countries. I think
they're at 50,000 members now.
Yeah,
something like that is crazy.
So just a little bit of an overview for Vistage from your perspective, and just to kind of give the listeners who might not have heard of a company or this type of an organization.
Well, first, I'll talk about results. You talked about being too busy. That is the number one pushback I ever got. And my promise to everyone, well, first off, I believe the role of a CEO is a 24-hour-a-week job. And then the other time is to go out and do whatever you can to develop and grow. But it's that inside the business, 24 hours a week max is the job, because you've got other people who are supposed to be there running the business. You're supposed to be delegating. 100% of the ones that join don't know that, don't understand that. But within a year or two, they're working 24 hours a week and they're spending their time on other things. And what that leads to is growth. And Vistage companies, the statistics are that Vistage companies, like during COVID, they grew about 10, 12% when all the other companies lost money. But in my groups, pretty much everyone that I've worked with, and I don't mean this to be about me, this is just about the process and where they are, it has created wealth beyond anything they ever dreamed of. And their businesses are in places they never dreamed of. And they're spending 10 times more time with their families. If we accomplish that, my job's done. I'm happy.
Right.
And so that's what Vistage brings. And it's really about seeing how 15 to 18 other people do it, how they run their business, and also hearing their excuses or hearing their justifications, and then hearing them brag about how they accomplished. So you get all these pieces, and there's either I can do that or I'm not going to do that. And so there's so much learning just by interacting.
So that's the cohort size. It's about 18 to 20 people.
Yeah, 15 to 18.
15 to 18.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'd like to do, Les, now is I'd like to pivot a little bit, and let's talk about 2019. So
a wonderful year.
Yeah. So, here you are, you're on top of the world. You've got these group, at this point, you're in the middle of probably highlights of coaching. I mean, it's, anything you do, whether you're starting a company or be a coach for 18 or 20 people, there's the period of getting it up to speed. And then it's when it's humming. And those are my favorite times. And I'm sure So, you're clearly in your stride. Just talk about the encounter, because I think it's going to set a little bit of the tone as we get to turn into that a little bit and then talk about the book.
Okay. Well, it was December of 2019. I just finished surfing. And every day that I would surf, I'd come back and go on my patio and play my ukulele. And I went to play, and my left hand didn't work. I couldn't get it to go anywhere I mentally tried to tell it to go. So I thought, there might be a problem here. And then I went to send some emails, and my left hand was bouncing all over the keyboard. Like, I'm not hitting any of the keys I need. This is crazy. So I went to the doctor and tests and everything. I get this phone call from my general practitioner, and he says, "Hello, Mr. Whitney, this is Dr. Vo. We found a mass in your brain." And okay, thank you, and hung up.
Oh.
And then my wife's sitting across at her desk, and she said, "What happened?" I said, "I don't know, I hung up." Fortunately, we had already made an appointment with a neurologist for a couple of days later. So that's when we did more tests, and we found out I had, we knew I had the brain tumor then, and then we found out I had stage 4 lung cancer. And at that point, they said 6 months to live. The chance of making it 5 years is 1.6%.
Wow.
And so that was kind of shocking.
So what at that point, obviously, I think a lot of people that listen to this, you get that call usually from, a loved one, a friend, or yourself personally. It's harder for you to kind of hunker down and just go off the grid, because you got 18 to 20 people that kind of...
Actually, 60, because I had 3 groups.
Yeah. Okay. And so it's almost like, is it time for a major life reorg on priorities, because now it's time, to go to war. And so talk a little bit about kind of, that first month or two of how you get into your orientation, because eventually you start turning it into something I'm not sure I would have done.
I'm unique. I get this. I handle things differently than people. And I don't know why. It is what it is. And so we were in shock for a day. Then the next day, I woke up and I said, okay, what can I do to turn this into something good for whatever I have left? And I said, the first thing I have to do is I have to bring in my community. I started a blog on this caringbridge.org. And I just put out to the world, here's what's going on with me. Here's the story. Here's what I'm going through. And here's my emotions. Here's my fears. Here's my hopes. I laid it all out on the line. And because I really feel it's important that we include everyone in our community. If we're on a health journey like this, they want to be involved. They just don't know how. And the only way they can get involved is if I invite them in. And so I invited them all in, and which was, pretty cool, because I don't know what I'm thinking until I write. And so as I was writing, I was going, okay, this is how I'm feeling about this. This is how, now I can figure out where I'm going to go next. With my 3 groups, I thought they need to experience the most real conversation they've ever experienced in their lives. And I think this is the opportunity for that. And so I stood in front of each group and I said, here's the situation. I've got stage 4 lung cancer. I've got 6 months to live. And I want you to all just stop for a moment and share what's going on with you now that you've heard that. I want to know what your emotions are on that, what your feelings are.
Wow.
And how, and I took, you can get this online, a feelings wheel. It has about 70 or 80 feeling words. And I said, circle 3 or 4 words that will help you express what you're feeling. And there was a lot of crying, a lot of fear that they had about their own lives. But it was the most real, the most magical conversation. I left so uplifted and so full of joy that these people got to express themselves and got to understand where they are in life and what they are feeling. So it was like this was the first step in using my cancer as a gift. And so they to this day still talk about that meeting and the impact that had on their lives.
So you get ready, you're doing the blogs,
Yep.
and then I'm kind of sensing a catharsis. You're by writing stuff down, you're kind of getting stuff out of your mind and getting it on paper, and then you're
Yes.
able to kind of look at it objectively. So I totally get that. What about the idea then of where you start to formalize a book, an outline, and you start going, maybe I should put this out there. What was your objectives for doing that?
I was 2 years into it now, 2 years of the blog.
Yeah.
And I was getting notes from different people saying, please, Les, turn this into a book. Write a book, Les.
Yeah.
This is so helpful. And I thought about it, and I thought, if I could get this into the hands, first, my book is not about cancer. It's about living a great life for the rest of your life, regardless of what happens to you.
Yep.
It just that cancer is the vehicle that I've used to live a great life. Sounds weird, doesn't it? I've got cancer and that's helped me live a great life, but it's the truth. And so I wanted to make something that people that have challenges in any area of their life, they can read and say, okay, maybe I could look at my life in a different way. People with cancer, I could look at my life in a different way. And then what really blew me away was the number of people who have written to me and said, my spouse, my husband, my kid, my sister had a cancer or a major disease. And I thought I knew what they were going through, but I didn't know until I read your book. And that helped me understand how I can be a better support and more help to them. What a gift to me. You know, if I accomplish that, then I couldn't be happier.
Les, when you started talking through a concept, I like I said, I've listened to a lot of your interviews and I've read your book. The thing that I think is a professional, and I try to be compassionate, empathetic too, is like I see an executive coach book. Like you said, it's funny you say this is not about cancer, because honestly, when I read it, a lot of it, like there was a section very specifically that I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, which was on vulnerabilities. And, we can talk about it in the context of cancer, but we can also talk in the context of your career. Yep. Your friendships, a lot of different things. And I think, one of the quotes or one of the items, you talked in there was like, you're saying, strength, joy, hope, happiness, love. And so there was probably a third dimension of your book was a little bit of a love for your wife or your,
Yes.
the primary partner. And how do you take care of a partner through that process? Talk a little bit about vulnerability and the importance of that.
Vulnerability, first off, is not a weakness. Sharing what we're feeling, sharing our fears, sharing our hopes. I think that is the only way to open it up for others. Now, my wife and I, talk about our cancer. We have cancer. We are dealing with this. And I think that's important, that we understand that, man, my wife is going through hell. And she's not going to express it to me. She's not going to say, God, I'm so afraid you're going to die soon. And she's not going to say that. And so I've got to give her the opportunity to express her emotions, though, in whatever way I can. And I've got to encourage her to create a community that she can turn to and say, gosh, I'm afraid of what's happening with Les. It's bothering me. And so it's important to me that I share everything with her and her community and my community, so that when she gets together with her community, they can see, wow, I see Les had some setbacks last week. How you doing, Teresa? How's that landing on you? It just makes it so much easier for her to open up and say, thank you for asking. Boom. And so vulnerability is so important to healing and to getting through this process. One of the things that saddens me, and it happens with a frequency I just can't imagine, is the people who say, don't tell anyone. Keep it to ourselves. We don't want anyone to know. I know of 4 occasions where children have come to me, 40, 50-year-old children, but children have come to me and said, my dad didn't tell me until 2 weeks before he died that he was going through this. I didn't have the opportunity to be complete with him. I didn't have the opportunity to share his journey. I didn't, and they felt like they were deprived of love and of a piece of life.
You think that's I mean, the way you're describing it, you know, and I know you mean this very respectfully for the people that did treat their kids like this, but it's almost like maybe the people look at it as a selfish move. Like the person should have included them and they didn't. And so therefore, and I think if you put yourself probably in the person that was actually, physically going through that, I think they might be looking at him just trying to make it easier on them. And I think that's the dilemma.
That's the mindset. Yeah. Yes, that's the mindset. I want to make it easy. I don't want them to have to go through this. I don't want them to have to feel the pain, which is so opposite of so many things I believe. Yeah. I believe we should have pain in our lives. We should go through everything together. So, but yes, I think that's it. They're trying to be a good steward of their family, and I don't. Yeah, nothing negative toward them about that. I just, in my belief system, feel they would be a much better steward of the family if they included the family.
So Les, and again, maybe because I'm trying to look for maybe too much leadership in this book, but something else. There was a portion in here where you talked about the roller coaster ride, and there was a part where you got back from a trip and you didn't feel 100%, and you went down, and I guess maybe to set the stage a little bit before I get to my question is, from my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because the book was completed in 2022. We're sitting here in 24, so there may be a little bit of a misread at this point, but it seemed like at that point of the book, you were kind of destined to be on potentially chemo forever, possibly, or, you had to kind of go through that process, and it's a never ending cycle right up to the point where, and I've had family members where chemo doesn't work anymore. And so, when you kind of go through that process, you also kind of incur things that happen, things related to the chemo, other things get knocked out. So you're kind of sitting back going through that. But the leadership principle, now to get to my question, is I thought something I took from the book is sometimes when I'm in tough situations at work and I've got things going on, sometimes as a CEO or owner, and I'm running a portion of IBM's consulting business now, but I want to also make pretty quick decisions. I want to be able to be, deliberate. That's an important action term with people that get things done. And I think what I learned in your book is you gave a couple examples where you really started to go rolling down the hill a bit fast, and then time went by. And you started realizing, and then all of a sudden it wasn't what you thought it was, even though you are, the expert in it. And I think it happened a few more times in the book. And then I think in the end, you start realizing, stop jumping to conclusions and let some time come by to process. And I think that was the leadership principle that I took from that was, too quick to judge too early, you're going to be all over the place. Right. And, but you got to kind of find the right time to be alarmed or concerned. Anything that you would put out there for the listeners?
That's an interesting takeaway, because there frequently is an opportunity to go into crisis mode throughout this process. So you mentioned my chemo, and my next chemo session will be my 90th. I have chemo every 3 weeks. That's 17 times a year, and I'm very, very sick for a week after. So imagine life being sick 17 weeks out of the year. And so just putting that into my life has created an awareness of how precious life is and how much I've got to take advantage. But it's also, I'm very aware of all these opportunities for setbacks. What's not in the book is the last year of my life, which the chemo stopped working in April. We decided to go back on an immunotherapy called Keytruda, which we had taken me off of because it had filled my lungs with gunk and I couldn't breathe. So, but Keytruda was working in controlling the cancer. So we put me back on Keytruda. it looks like it got control of the tumors, but I got this, what they call pneumonitis, and my lungs were filled up. So they had to take me off it again. And I've been on this drug called prednisone to try to get my lungs back to normal, which I've got another week and a half before. And that completely has disrupted everything in my life. But the last 3 months, I was convinced, just by what was happening with my body because of the prednisone and everything else, that I was probably going to be dead by July. I had convinced myself that I wasn't worried about it. It was like, okay, that's the end. I'm going to live as well as I can live until then. Now it looks like I've got a few more tests to do, and where I'm off of the Keytruda, so we don't know what we're going to do, but hopefully we'll find some other strategy. We do know the chemo's not working, but we're keeping me on it. Kind of a weird story. But the important lesson, you're right, is be aware that things are happening, and it could be bad. And the doctor didn't do a great job of and many times he would say, yeah, we've got 2 new tumors, 2 new tumors in your brain, 2 new tumors in your lung. And then we would do some more testing, and 3 months later you go, oops, nope, but we misidentified it. And so I was like, well, wait a minute. How can I not be concerned? But I guess my jumped in conclusion was I was questioning whether I should have communicated that to the world and then drawn it back. But then again, this is my journey, and I want them on board. So I've shared it. I tried not to show despair and just went forward. And I didn't take any unnecessary action. And I think that's the main thing. I think as an executive, when something goes wrong, everybody knows it. So don't hide it. Share it. But be willing to say, I don't know what we need to do yet. We'll figure this out as a team.
Unless I'm telling you that message was, and because it's cancer, you actually had examples to kind of, it was a really well illustrated, way of handling it too, where, the real situation. So I think, the other part that I think was awesome, that I learned in this book is, you kind of planned your life around things. And again, I live in DC and here, and I'm all over. And even doing this podcast, like I take advantage in between things to, hey, who do I know where I'm at? And I look at my target and I'm like, these are people that I wanted to talk to. And so it's trying, and I got in your book, and I'm very specifically your trips. A lot of times you would plan right after and then sleep it off on the plane and then land and get someplace and then have 2 or 3 really bad days, but then you'd be good for a bit.
Have a great trip and then come home just in time to get sick again.
Yeah. Did you travel a lot before you got sick? Because I'm noticing, like, you and I've talked. You were in Africa a couple weeks ago, and then you definitely do a lot of travel. And we've tried to get together before, and so I was just kind of curious. Or is traveling something you picked up when
it was when I started my export company years ago? I was traveling, and I just fell in love with being somewhere in the world. And so my wife and I have always tried to make minimum 1, perhaps 2 international trips a year. And when I got sick, it was, we're going to take off whenever, I got 2 weeks out of every 3, and we're going to take off because that's what we love. And so, we've done a little more travel since I got sick.
When you go through all this treatment, all of the chemo treatments, this is something, you're around people that are going through this. Some of them you probably see come and go through it in a very bad way very quickly. Then you got, from where you're at, it's almost a little bit of a marathon guy. It's like, and so it gives a lot of people hope. And I was just kind of curious. And again, I'm asking you not only from somebody that's going through it very bravely, but as a leadership coach, do you find opportunities to evangelize a lot with the people that are going through this? Or do you find yourself kind of trying to be a little quiet and a little like, hey, I'm going to put that on the shelf and not take that into this?
I don't know if evangelize is the word, but when I'm in getting my chemo It's a couple hour process. And as I'm sucking up the juice, I often take my little juice gurney wheel thing around, and I look for someone who's sitting there a little lost and forlorn, and I just sit down and talk to them as they're getting theirs. And I talk to them about their life and their hopes and their fears. And I'm trying to get them to feel that they're not alone in this whole process. And so, especially during COVID, I did that a lot because they did not allow family or friends in the room when we were getting. And so I visited people the whole time, just trying to make them feel a little less alone. Yeah.
The other thing, I guess, facing fear and uncertainty, I think that the process that you go through to be able to, like you said, even as we sit here and you were like really calm, it's like, I'm not really too sure what medicine we're going to use. Chemo doesn't, but it's almost like I have buddies that sail, and we'll be out on the boat, and they're like, it looks like we may not have enough gas to make it here, and you're sitting back on, don't we turn around like right now, and but they're very calm, and again, I think again, just a principle of the book, it kind of different ways of dealing with fear,
Right?
And I didn't know if there was anything very specific that you would think that because a lot of people that listen to this show, they're interested in doing maybe something different.
Right.
Maybe and like Mohammed, just he woke up and wanted to do something really different, and so I think when something again from this book, even though it's Cancer's Gift, is I think I've started to look through like inspiration to like, don't be fearful.
Yep. And I think I don't know why I'm this way. I have no clue. But I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of the future because I can't change it. I can't do any, I can make plans and I could work my plan and I can do all those smart things. But what's going to happen is going to happen. And so whether it's good or bad, I'm not going to worry about it until it happens. And so that's just the mindset. Same thing with the past. I've done good things, I've done bad things, but they're done. I've done them. So why even think about it? Why put any energy into it? And my mind will go there. And then I'll tell myself, can you change it? No. And live with it. And so what that creates is a great interest in today, in the moment, because I can live today in the most beautiful way. And that's kind of my mindset. If I forget about what's going to happen, because there's 50,000 things that could happen, I forget about what has happened because I can't change it, then I have the most beautiful days every day. And that's just been my philosophy. And I know it's not easy. I can say it and I don't understand why it is easy for me. I just would encourage people to take that moment when they are steeped in fear and say, okay, is there anything I can really do about it besides worry? And, or if do I need to keep wishing for a better past? It's not going to happen. So if they can just pause and give themselves the opportunity to say, what would make today a perfect day? Then I think that would help so many people.
Before we get into the closing here, it's something I was just kind of curious in the work environment when, we deal with different types of things, and sometimes you deal with the death of a team member. Sometimes, somebody that you're working with is going through something really bad with their family member. Any advice that, as you kind of go through, I will tell you what I did see in the book was, it's sort of like your vulnerabilities thing is like to address it, to talk about it. I think in the work environments today, a lot of people it's an uncomfortable time. It's like time. As a leader and an executive, for me, it's like, it's hard because the branding today, right? Be empathetic, right. Be caring, be compassionate. And the other part of it is, mind your business. Don't mingle, be careful. And am I crossing the line? I don't, I want to be respectful. And so a lot of times, it's confusing sometimes for, managers, for executives and then even for workers. And being an executive coach, and I'm sure you get these types of questions of how do I deal with grief in the workplace?
So I'm going to start with a fundamental that I have. And I've told this to my employees throughout the years. I've told it to my spouse. I've told it to my members. And that is, don't make decisions for other people. And what I mean by that is, I'm not going to have the conversation because they're not going to like it. Now I've made a decision for them. And so I believe as the executive, I should go in and say, how are you doing? Are you doing okay? What's happening? Open-ended questions. Just what's happening? What are you feeling? What are you going through? They have the opportunity to say, I'm not ready to talk about that now. And then it's my job to say, thank you. I'll back off. I'll give you the space.
Yeah.
Or they can say, thank you for caring and start sharing. So I think it's important that we get over our discomfort, because what's stopping us is really our discomfort, not worrying about it. The story is it's their discomfort, but it's our discomfort. Mm-hmm. And I always push into discomfort. I always, here's a core belief I've had, and it's that if I think it, I'm going to ask it or say it, period, because I can't be the only person in the world that's thinking it. Mm-hmm. So if I think I'm dealing with someone and they say something, do something, I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to make it visible. Mm-hmm. I've offended people doing that, but I think it's important that we again, keep everything out in the open and talk about it.
Yeah. Let me ask you kind of closing thoughts. So again, I just want to kind of reiterate the book, Cancer's Gift. I was just kind of curious, are you still writing? What is next? Right now it seems like from what I can tell, it's, on top of doing everything that you're doing and helping people, you're really trying to get your message out. Right. And can you talk a little bit about that process and what you hope to achieve?
Well, I'm still doing my blog. So that's keeping people updated. I've been thinking, that's funny. Last night I woke up in the middle of the night thinking what I want to write next. I could either continue the story, because lots has happened. There's lots of story in there. And there's also the people that have worked with me have all talked about what they call less-isms. And it's little sayings that I come up with that are very meaningful to them, and they use them to guide their values, guide how they show up and things like that. And so I thought it might be fun to write something about less-isms, but I don't know if there'd be an audience. And the problem with writing a book is writing a book's not hard. You just write, you just put it all down. But then getting anyone to read it, that's hard, because then I have to get out there in the public and I have to get people interested and get in front of the right people. And when, being 17 weeks out of the year and not knowing my future is, it may be I'm writing for nobody, but that's okay.
Les, say one of the first people that I've had on this podcast, her name is Lynn Cox. She's an author, swam some of the most historic swims, long distance, cold water, Antarctica, remarkable. But she has written 5 books, and it's interesting. Is like I know her outside of doing all this stuff, and I always see her and I follow her, and she is all over. And I think she goes and talks, and a little bit of promoting her book, but she has the type of personality like you do that it's like, I can't tell whether it's like promoting the book or just getting out and talking to people, because she loves to talk to people, and she is very inspiring. And so it seems like this is like you said, the journey, but it's like a journey of love, and it's something that it seems like you really are enjoying doing.
Right. I very much so am.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah, well,
and I've set a goal of reaching 1 million people with my message. So figuring out how to do that, I haven't yet, but I'm working on it.
Yeah. What type of feedback do you get when you people like? I'm preparing for an interview, and I know people that know you, so I have an interest. But what, are you achieving the objective that you?
Oh my gosh, it is so amazing. people coming up to me out of the blue and telling me what the book meant to them, what they took away from it. Just going to Amazon.com and looking at the reviews.
Yeah.
Some of those reviews just bring me to tears.
Yeah.
Because of, and it's not, oh, you're a great writer, because I'm not a great writer. It's giving them hope. It's inspiring them to live a great life for the rest of their life. And to me, if I can help people live that, then it does it all. And so frequently I get this feedback that just blows me away and sometimes brings me to tears. It's like, okay, I did something good.
It starts having a life past you. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
That's very exciting. Well, Les, I want to tell you how much I really appreciate the opportunity to get you on the show, to learn directly your story, and to hopefully get you to the million listeners and people that have heard your story. I honestly, anybody interested, definitely Amazon was the easiest way for me. And it seemed that people, my producer, a bunch of people on the show were very interested. So we got a bunch of the books.
Thank you.
So I would just encourage people. And so Les, seriously, thanks for everything that you're doing, and really appreciate it.
And if I can add one thing.
Please.
If you've got the book and you've read it, then give it to someone else and get them to read it. I don't care if I sell them. I just want it in the hands.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that is awesome. Well, again, I appreciate you being on the show, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks again for joining me today on the Ameritocracy Show. Be sure to follow me on social media and our website at troyedgar.com, where you can get more information and sign up for my weekly email. I hope you have a great week.